新州州长Berejiklian和技能高等教育厅长Geoff Lee 联合新闻稿。2020年8月20日星期四 ，COVID-19 支持的课程高达11万5千名学生注册。西南威尔士州政府的免费 COVID-19 支持短期课程在上个月关闭之前，通过了11万5千名学生注册，其中医学管理是最受欢迎的领域。这套在线课程为西南威尔士州居民在大流行高峰期间提供了学习新技能的机会，并且由西南威尔士州政府全额资助。州长Berejiklian说，在大流行期间，参加 TAFE New South Wales 短期课程的学员正在充分利用该技能。Berejiklian 女士说，我们知道技能培训对于推动该州的经济有多么重要，它将在 COVID-19 大流行中扮演至关重要的角色。西南威尔士州政府的 COVID-19 免费短期课程为 COVID-19 期间的技能提升提供了机会，也有力地推动全州的工作职场。COVID-19 支持免费短期课程计划的成就包括总共11万5537名学生注册， 27% 的学生首次在 TAFE New South Wales 学习。西南威尔士州 TAFE 首次学习的学生中有 10% 至 15% 打算与公共培训机构进行进一步的学习。第一次付款中最受欢迎的课程是表述医疗管理技能的素质。技能和高等教育厅长 Geoff Lee 赞赏西南威尔士州 TAFE 的完美的课程计划。我要祝贺 TAFE New South Wales 实施这项计划的方式，在如此短的时间内，在一个程序中达到11万5千多个注册，确实是一个了不起的结果。我希望这些课程能在这个困难时期为人们提供帮助，李先生说。该计划于上月底关闭了新生入学。
May have lost their jobs, are concerned about their jobs and want to retrain. So I'm very pleased to have with us here today Dr. Lee, the Minister for Tertiary Education. Pleasingly, we had 115,000 enrolments in the free TAFE courses we offered, and I'm pleased to say that the highest number of courses that were taken up related to medical administration, which is very relevant given we need more health workers at the moment. And pleasingly, we've seen a number of people reskill and be able to boost their CVs to either get new careers, to reskill in the hope of getting a new job, or else thinking about new pathways forward. And I want to assure the community that in addition to our packages to support small businesses, we're really focusing in on people who want to get reskilled, retrained during this time, so that once JobKeeper in particular runs out, that we have people ready and willing to take up new opportunities because they've acquired new skills during this time. So thank you to Dr. Lee and to all the great people at TAFE who've been able to adjust the teaching, adjust the way they teach, and thank you to the 115,000 people who enrolled to take up one of these courses. It's really important for us to communicate to our citizens that not only are we dealing with the economic and health consequences of COVID, but we're also looking at opportunities in which we can support those who've been directly impacted because of the virus in terms of jobs and skills and employment opportunities. I'll now ask Dr. Chant to give her daily update, and then Dr. Lee will expand further on the opportunities that TAFE has provided to reskill and provide qualifications, and then we'll take your questions.
So there were 5 new cases of COVID were diagnosed in the 24 hours to 8 p.m. last night, bringing the total number of cases in New South Wales to 3,782. Pleasingly, there were 28,767 tests in the 24-hour period, so thank you very much for community members responding to our call out to get tested. Of the 5 new cases reported to 8 p.m. last night, 2 are returned overseas travellers in hotel quarantine, and 3, all located in southwestern Sydney, are locally acquired, including 1 who is a household contact of a previously reported case associated with the July funerals cluster, bringing that cluster to 74 cases. And 1 case is an outpatient at Liverpool Hospital. That's a lady in her 60s, and she was mentioned yesterday in the press conference. Links with other cases and the source of infection are being investigated. We're looking at community exposures as well as any links to any previous cases that have occurred linked to Liverpool Hospital. And there was also one gentleman in his 20s who, again, source was unknown, but investigations are underway. Public health action has occurred with his close contacts being tested and also isolated for that 14 days. In relation to our ICU, we have 8 COVID patients in intensive care and 5 of those are ventilated. So just again to reiterate that message that this is an incredibly critical phase in our response. We are seeing these continual low levels of transmission particularly in southwestern Sydney, but also popping up in Western Sydney from time to time. It's critical that we continue to see those high testing rates. It's important that the community continues to embrace those COVID-safe behaviours such as social distancing and wearing a mask when you can't socially distance.
Thank you, Premier. Good morning. It's great news to be announced over 115,000 people have enrolled in the fee-free TAFE courses in the last 3 months. Can I say, after the pandemic-19, the world of work has actually changed. Many people are actually working from home. This has allowed these people to actually upskill whilst they're working at home. For some people that have been stood down or lost their job, these courses have allowed people to reskill and even change careers. So it's great news. There's 115,000 people have taken that opportunity. It's a record amount for TAFE. TAFE's delivered these online to make sure that they're safely delivered. What is increasingly important is that over 30% of these people that have taken up the TAFE courses, this is their first time they've dealt with TAFE, and many of those people are actually actively considering doing ongoing further education, so as a result of these courses. What's particularly important for the individual, though, is that these 2 to 4 to 6 units of study, which are fee-free, are actually valued between $180 to up to $1,500, from pharmacy, basic pharmacy, some of the training administration, right up to computing skills at over $1,500. So it's a real benefit to those people that are doing it tough at the moment. They can upskill, reskill, and it's certainly changed the lives of many people. TAFE have adapted to this online world to be able to deliver in mass scale right across the state through every campus, and we look forward to announcing future packages which will help those seeking to upskill and reskill in their careers. Thank you.
Questions?
Premier, John Barilaro is obviously on the Victorian border this morning calling for the permit system to be scrapped. Can we expect any changes to either where the border bubble sits or the permits?
Oh, look, we've been managing the situation as best we can, and it is a difficult situation, and if we can make further improvements, of course we will. We've already made a number of improvements to make sure people are accessing essential services and making sure that, in particular, our agriculture and farming communities are having access to workers. So we've been tweaking the arrangements as we go on, but I do want to stress that when it comes to our Victorian border, that pleasingly I was able to and continue to be in conversation with the Victorian Premier and the Prime Minister to make sure that we're making the situation as easy as we can for all concerned. And of course, if there's further we need to do, we will. But I also want to stress that I'd much rather have this conversation than a conversation where the whole state was forced into lockdown because the virus got out of control. So I appreciate how difficult it is for our border communities, but please know we're working really hard to make it as easy as possible. When you have, a history of a century of commerce and uninterrupted commerce and trade and 55 border crossings, it is not an easy task for everybody. I want to thank our communities for their patience. We appreciate their frustration, and the government is continually looking at ways in which we can provide direct support to those communities.
Do you have any detail on financial assistance?
Oh, look, I'm pleased to say that we're finalising a package to, in particular, support small businesses in those communities. So we'll have more to say about that soon.
Do
you concede that there has been mismanagement in how your government locked down the border?
No.
John Barilaro is out there sending a confusing message, which is different to your message, saying that the permit should be scrapped. Is that?
Well, look, we think at all times we need to maintain a safe border, and the safety of all of our residents. The last thing that I would want to see is the disease seeding in rural and regional New South Wales. Everything we do is to protect our community, to keep our community safe. I appreciate the challenges that are involved, but consider the alternative. Consider the virus seeping into our regions, and that is something that I don't stand for. And what we need to do is to make sure we make life as easy as possible for those communities who are suffering on the borders. And I do appreciate the angst and the frustration. I'm almost in daily contact with community members who are going through difficult times. But having said that, we're also extremely open to making sure we can tweak things as we go along, as situations arise, as the seasons change, as the demand on working people change. We're always looking at ways in which we can improve things.
We're being told police are booking out motels who are coordinating the border closure into early next year. Can you confirm that the border will be closed for the remainder of 2020?
Well, in a pandemic, I think it would be too courageous for anybody to predict what's going to happen in the next few months. But what we have done in New South Wales is make sure that we consider all the opportunities we have to plan ahead. We are always very hopeful and optimistic. In fact, Dr. Chant and I and others might, consider where we could have been. I mean, 6 or 7 weeks after the Victorian outbreak was made aware of, New South Wales has been holding our own. I'm very pleased with how we've gone. I still remain anxious about the unknown cases we have in southwestern Sydney. We know the virus is circulating, but certainly I think to date we can look back and think the decisions we made at those times were the right ones. I remember getting criticised when we closed the Victorian border because I'd waited too long. Now I'm getting criticised that the border is there at all. So I've accepted and acknowledged in a pandemic I'll never be able to please everybody all of the time, and that's okay. I'm completely comfortable with that, because the decisions we take are for the safety and well-being of our citizens, and we're trying our hardest to get the right balance. But we appreciate along the way that certain communities will suffer more than others because of the consequences of our decisions, and our job is to identify them and support them specifically, which is what we're doing.
Have your talks with John Barilaro over the past couple of days been fairly tense?
No.
He seems to be completely almost opposed to what you're saying today.
No, we have an open and frank conversation, and he's always a bit outspoken. That's just John Barilaro.
The farmers are
Yep.
saying there may well be food shortages for these broader issues.
Well,
also, it seems that the Prime Minister needs more.
Well, no, the Prime Minister and myself have actually been in touch with each other about this matter, and we actually amended a health order a few days ago to support agricultural communities. So, as I said, because of seasonal changes, seasonal workers are required, agricultural needs change, and we've adopted that to the border changes. So we've made sure that farming communities aren't unfairly disadvantaged during this time. Quite the opposite. We've actually worked really hard to accommodate people who need to get across the borders. And please note that what we're talking about are actually people who live outside the designated border communities. So these are people who live deeper into regional Victoria. And as I've said consistently, we don't have line of sight on what the virus is doing in Victoria. We are trying to support the Victorian government as best we can, and I know they'd do the same if the situation was reversed. But we don't have as good line of sight as to what's happening beyond the border in parts of Victoria as obviously we do in New South Wales. And that's why we have to approach these issues cautiously and in a balanced way. And I'm pleased to say that in the last few days we have resolved a number of those issues those farming communities had raised, and I'm deeply grateful for them for bringing them to our attention. And that's my message to communities, not just on the borders but across the state. If you have picked up something which we may have overlooked or something which you feel we can improve, please let us know. That's our job. We can't promise that we'll always be on top of unintended consequences of what we're doing, but we can commit to trying to resolve challenges that individual groups or stakeholders might have from time to time.
But these issues were raised at the start, 7 weeks ago. Why has it taken you so long to address it and finally send John Barilaro?
Well, no, it's because we have quite the opposite. We've been dealing with these issues from day one, but the issues are evolving. What was an issue on day one is now different, and I'm confident that moving forward we'll continue to address those issues. But I'm much happier having this conversation than a conversation which was talking about the virus seeping into regional New South Wales.
But John Barilaro must also be worried about that. So is he sitting in on the same health meetings that
he is?
You?
Yep.
So how has he come to such a different conclusion?
Well, that's fine. That's a matter for him.
Almost every day we're told about COVID health order breaches, people who've broken the rules.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Almost every day we're told about people who've broken health orders,
Yeah.
COVID rules, parties and the like. So why weren't we told that a security company had illegally subcontracted a guard to work in hotel quarantine in April?
Commissioner, can I get you to... Yeah.
As you can appreciate, there's multi-levels of audits and checking and safety processes that we've built into the police-run quarantine hotel operation. One of those is to have that independent audit group to conduct the regular audits on all those hotels. Any breaches that they detect are reported to the Security Licensing and Enforcement Directorate, who then conduct an investigation. So we're looking at two at the moment, one that was on the 2nd of April and one that was on the 13th of May. The one that both of them have been and are being investigated by our agency, the New South Wales Police Force Security Enforcement and Licensing Directorate. The 13th of May, that one has finalised in regards to the issuing of a $2,200 fine. The one that occurred in April is still the subject of ongoing investigations. As you can appreciate, the security company are entitled to due course, and New South Wales Police Force are working with them in regards to it. Both of the security guards had their services terminated as a result of those reports.
Can you say which company was involved in the 13th of May instance?
I don't have those details with me at the moment.
Premier, on the hotel security hotel quarantine issue, you said yesterday about 2,000 people have developed COVID from who were in hotel quarantine.
No, there were. What I said yesterday was over 2,000 people had the virus from overseas.
And came through hotel quarantine. Should all hotel staff and security working in quarantine be wearing masks at all times during their shifts?
Well, I know that all those measures are taken into account, and I might ask either Dr. Chant or Assistant Commissioner to talk about those measures. Do you want to take that question?
So I'd just like to say that there's been a strong support in infection control in supporting police with their advice around the hotel quarantine. And when the issues emerged in Victoria, there was further reviews and strengthening of that advice. So at the moment, we're confident that the level of infection control in relation to mask wearing and PPE, but obviously we learn from any new evidence about transmission on surfaces or any new evidence, and that's the purpose of our intense desire to get to the bottom of how the transmission event can occur. I think it's important that we continue to learn and reflect, and will amend any protocols or provide that advice to police so that any protocols can be amended.
Well, what is that level of advice, sorry, Dr. Chen? So do security guards have to then?
Today to, of course, support the local member in Justin Clancy, and along with Steph Cook, my parliamentary secretary and the member for Cootamundra, to make sure that we're engaging with locals in relation to the issues that actually matter and how we now reset the border and the border closure to better service the people of this region, not just within the bubble but understanding beyond the bubble. It's important that we engage at a local level, and I've had the opportunity over the past few weeks to ring the Mayor of Albury, to engage with him, Ramjo, the joint organisation as well, to understand exactly what the issues are. And someone that comes from a border community from Queanbeyan and the ACT border and my own electorate down to the Victorian border through Bombala and Delegate, I understand the importance of trying to get some of the uniqueness of the issues that we are facing. This morning we've already heard from those in education, from the boarding schools and parents and those principals about the issues that we're seeing on both sides of the border when it comes to year 11 and 12 students, but in general for students to traverse that border. We've also met with health and the impact that has on Albury, Wodonga Health, or again our health services beyond this region, and how that impacts on the movement of staff, specialists, doctors, right across the board. And later on today we'll continue to meet with businesses from all sectors, from tourism, agriculture, and of course engage with the councils that have been impacted most in dealing with this. There is no question that 7 weeks on, 7 weeks ago we made some tough decisions out of Sydney, we made some tough decisions in protecting the millions of people of New South Wales when those cases in Victoria One, couldn't be traced. Two, we're escalating at a rate beyond that anyone had seen even in the first phase of this crisis back in March, April. And we had to make some tough decisions, and with those tough decisions, unfortunately, it impacts on communities. 7 weeks on, some of the numbers across the border are getting better. The risk profile is reducing, and therefore there is an argument for a reset today to so that we can move forward. And that reset has to be in line with what the community believes the issues are. To lift the border entirely in one swoop may be impossible and may be detrimental to the well-being and health of this region, let alone New South Wales across the board. And that's why we'll do it in a measured way. I'm here to get that information. I'm here to go back to Sydney and talk through it with the Premier and along with the leadership team in what we can do going forward. I can't make promises of what I can achieve, but I am going back with the facts, the data, someone that understands border communities. The Premier has indicated this morning we are working through a financial package to support those businesses. Like in the first wave of the COVID crisis, the New South Wales Government have supported businesses financially. There is a strong argument that businesses in this region that are impacted by the closure and in one way the lockdown need further financial support. I've seen that package. That package will be formally announced by the Premier at a point, but I can assure you that that package will be delivered and delivered to support businesses in this region. With that, I'll ask Justin Clancy to say a few words and Steph Cook, and then we'll take some questions.
Thanks, Deputy Premier. Just want to make a few short comments. First one is, we have the Deputy Premier here in Albury today, Albury-Wodonga, but close to my heart and close to the Deputy Premier's heart is that it's not just Albury-Wodonga, it's all of our communities right along the border. So for me, it's just as important whether you're say Chrissy at the pub in Tooma, through to Posson, Helen Purtle in Mulwala today, through to communities down Baruga, down to Moama, right along the border, equally important as the community of Albury-Wodonga. I do want to say in that regard too is, for me the expectation is this is not going to be about flicking a switch today, but it is making sure that we are, as the Deputy Premier said, now engaging in a conversation about how we reset the situation, how do we move forward for our communities here along the border. And finally, I do want to say to the Deputy Premier, thank you for being here. Thank you to the people that you've brought with you, the police, the health, to have Parliamentary Secretary Steph Cook here as well. It is important that you are here to listen to our community and to be part of working together for a solution forward. But most importantly, I want to thank our community. You've been straining at the bit. You have been playing your part. Continue playing your part, but know that we are starting to make sure that the word will be heard, but also I want to see it turned into action as well. Thank you.
For the moment. 就是视频的翻译功能。这个功能非常适合经常观看美剧或者其他非中文语言类视频的朋友。如果你的英语水平不是特别好的话，那么使用这个翻译功能就非常的方便了。它可以在线将影片中的这个英文对白字幕翻译成中文字幕，因为 YouTube 具备了非常强大的自动翻译功能，不管视频是什么语言的字幕，它都可以在线翻译成适合你的语言。但是使用这个功能的前提是你所观看的视频开启了这个 CC 字幕。我们现在找一个视频给大家演示一下。我们先点击视频右下方的这个 CC 字幕按钮，视频就会显示对方所上传的这个 CC 字幕。现在它这个视频显示的是英文字幕，我们给它翻译成适合我们的观看字幕。比如说我这边点击设置按钮里面的字幕，然后选择下面的这个自动翻译，它里面几乎涵盖了世界上全部主流的语言。比如这里我选择中文简体，这样视频里就会出现中文字。